do start tonight, I would like to acknowledge the traditional homelands of the Native and Indigenous people who live and continue to live on the land that we gather upon. These lands were originally inhabited by the Omaha, Ponca, Pawnee, Oto-Missouri, Saute Dakota Sioux, Kansas, Iowa, Cheyenne, and Winnebago people. We take this time to acknowledge the past, present, and future of Indigenous people and to recognize the ever-present systemic inequities stemming directly from past wrongdoings and strive to commit ourselves indefinitely to respecting and reconciling this long history of injustice for all people. Omaha Table Talks, or as we call them OTTs, was initially recreated in 2003 by the Social Justice Advisory Committee of Catholic Charities Omaha. And then in 2012, it inclusive communities acquired OTTs and shifted them into the larger public formats over comfort food that we know of them today. Over the past couple of years, we have partnered with other organizations to provide table talk formats around different platforms of different communities' voices. So our QTTs, Queer Table Talks, in partnership with Out Nebraska. We have an AAPI Table Talk that is in partnership with the Nebraska Asian American Leadership Alliance group here in Omaha to prioritize and provide a platform for AAPI conversations and voices. And then we have a table talk in partnership with Echo Hawk Left Hand and Nicole Bangus and members of the Native American Community Partnership of Omaha Metro area to provide a platform for Native and Indigenous conversations. Tonight, I would like to thank and acknowledge our sponsors, Leisure Foundation, Cox Communications, and American Family Insurance for helping sponsor our table talks. And then remind everybody here that we are recording tonight's conversation. It's just the first part, actually, it'll be the whole thing tonight because we are doing a slightly different format. And that will be on YouTube later on our YouTube channel for folks to watch again. And thank you to our ASL interpreters, Pam and Tracy, and then our Spanish language interpreters online, even though we are trying to fix that technical glitch. And with that, I'm going to be done talking and pass this over to Mliss, and they will introduce the panel and how tonight's going to go.
All right, is this thing on? Oh, there we go. Hi, everyone. I was gonna do the traditional, how are we feeling tonight? But I'm not in the club. My name is Mliss Rose, or as many of my community members know me, Donna Resuscitate, DNR, if you ever see me on the floor. My pronouns are they, them. I have a degree in sociology and psychology, and I'm currently pursuing my master's in developmental psych at UNL. I'm a show producer and a full-time drag queen here in Omaha. I'm a member of the House of Mischief, as well as a member of the House of Carter. When I proposed this panel, it was as a direct result of not only my career, but because of what's been going on in our local legislature. I feel as though drag and queer identities are not dissimilar. We are one and the same, and our histories are very deeply intertwined. So that's my cute little introduction. I did just have top surgery 5 days ago, y'all. So I'm feeling a little tight in the chest, a little bit medicated. So I'm hoping that I can still get all my points across tonight. But as I told the panelists earlier this week, my breasts were a drag and they are now history. So without further ado, I'm gonna have Ziggy go ahead and introduce themselves.
Yes, I am Soraya Vogel, also known on stage in the art community as Ziggy Quinn. My pronouns are they, them. I am an admin and former inclusionary chair for VFF Omaha. I also work with Northspire, Queer Night. I produce my own shows under Ziggy Productions. I do a lot of stuff. I work for You Magazine, which is a Black queer magazine here in Omaha. So I'm all over the place. Happy to be here.
They're very worldwide. Hello, my name is Purris Stilton, but if you're writing a check, my name is Michaela Harry. I am a friend. I am also a show producer. I host a show at the Bitsy Theater called Hanky Panky, which is a live burlesque band type of show, and a show called Peep Show. Both my shows highlight the amazing Black and brown queer artistry we have here in Omaha, which is a very used alt. But here we are. I am now the newest inclusionary chair for BFF Omaha, so I got their job now. And I'm just so excited to be here and speak about one of my favorite things in the world, which is drag.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaden Perkins. I'm a grassroots activist and local political operative. I've been on the front lines for issues that matter to the community, like police accountability, universal health care, abortion rights, all the civil rights things, criminal justice reform, and things like that. I have over 4 years of experience in field organizing, public policy, and campaign management as well. I'm happy to be here among this brilliant panel here to talk about the history of drag and queer liberation.
All right.
Okay. So now that we have all of our introductions, I want to do some kind of housekeeping here. For start, I would like to thank Inclusive Communities for allowing us this space to share not only history, but also firsthand anecdotes as local performers here in the community. Omaha has a gorgeous and rich drag history, and maybe someday soon we'll have an Omaha drag history panel. But I would just like to thank Inclusive Communities as well as our interpreters for providing access. Many people here, especially members of our community, know Mama Tracy, who comes to all of our drag shows to provide ASL accessibility. And then this panel is very meaningful because this is what knowledge should be, free and accessible to anyone who wants it. Now, there is also paper sheets with information on every table for convenience sake, as well as for our own personal time investment. We compiled a list of resources. We consider these to be, priority reading, priority viewing. As someone who may want to learn more about drag and history of drag, many of these resources will be referenced throughout today, but we wanted to make that easy for you to find. There's also a list of key terms with definitions as well as names of influential figures who may be mentioned today. We want to get as much information to you as efficiently as possible, so we can kind of cut out the middleman regarding terminology that some people might not be familiar with. But of course, if there are still any questions at the end of the lecture, we will happily answer them for you. Now, does every table have that paperwork? I tried my darndest to get them all around there. We looking good? You looking good? Alrighty. Now, for structure's sake, there is quite a lot of groundwork to cover, and it's no secret that male and female impersonation has existed for almost as long as we've had historic records being kept. They popped up in multiple cultures for hundreds of years, and even before the days of Shakespeare and early Asia. In order to make this as simple and absorbable as possible within our hour and a half, we created a tight 150-year timeline here, where we're going to be starting with the origin of the terminology of the word drag as it pertains to cross-dressing specifically as it relates to that, and that's going to be our starting point for today's lecture. We're going to be starting this panel with Ziggy. Ziggy is our local vaudevillian expert, and so they prepared a section that will start us with the origins of the word drag and the foundation that built our modern interpretation of drag. So I'm going to let Ziggy take it away.
Right, well, before drag was even established as a key phrase or a coined phrase, there was a lot of gender blending and a lot of gender impersonation happening in theater. You can see it all the way back to Mesopotamia, to the Greeks, to the Romans, and flowing all throughout Europe, Africa, Asia, even with a lot of your original theaters not allowing women to be performers. A lot of times men would have to cross-dress. When it comes to the term drag, though, it starts to show up in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's more defined in British slang. The original slang was dressed as a girl, but a lot of people also attribute it to the dresses dragging on the ground. So that's where the original term drag comes from. We start to notice a little bit more drag in pre-prohibition, so your theater bodybuilding era. So there's an art bodybuilding era, but there's also the theater, which is a smaller section. That's going to be your late 1800s into your early 1900s. That's going to be a lot more of the performances that are happening in the vaudeville theaters, like Britain, Paris, and then coming over to the United States. Losing my train here, my bad. Sometimes the conductor goes a little faster than I do. But no, as vaudeville theaters started to gain their popularity, this was during a time where a lot of things were considered debaucherous. We were starting to see a lot more terms in like psychological journals that were talking about like really coining the phrases we know today as like heterosexuality and homosexuality. Those weren't really seen as the same things we know them as today. Same with drag. That was mainly just a form of entertainment and comedy. Now it's starting to become an identity for people. So these are going to be happening in these theaters where there's variety acts, your original cabarets. There's going to be comedy, music, dance, burlesque, and then drag performances. They were significantly providing a platform for the gender blending community, but also the gender nonconforming community. So performers were able to express themselves and pave the way for modern drag culture. When talking about the art of vaudeville, we were talking about the extravagant makeup. So this is like, before that time, big crazy makeup was really only for like warriors and clowns. So being able to express gender through your makeup, throwing on these larger, like the invention of mink lashes. We all appreciate the invention of mink lashes. Really tooling the cheaper style wigs and not necessarily the ones that like higher society would be getting, like being able to have a more common usage for them. We're also talking about the beginning of sequence dresses and large ball gowns being brought into these shows. Costumes played a very big role and allowed performers to express themselves and create characters that resonated to their audience. Historically and socially influences the vaudeville and social acceptance. I've lost myself again, you guys. Look, I'm so sorry. But drag performances were often met with controversy and censorship. This is because of the certain laws and certain cultural things going back to the whole debauchery and defining gender roles and like right before the Great Depression and World War I. Some of your top vaudeville pioneers of gender blending theater, the ones that would actually be kind of the icons of what we know as drag today, would be like the Fascinating Widow. That was Julian Eltich. They were the first female impersonator to become a star in vaudeville. He was also known for his signature feather hats and boas, so that's where you get a lot of those bigger things. He's bringing those from Paris to the United States. And he drew like some of the largest crowds that they had ever seen in some of these small little theaters, to the point where they would actually keep the front doors open, which would get them in trouble with the law because it was public indecency to see the man in his dress. We also have the Big Show, Bert Savvy. They were a vaudeville performer known for their comedic performances. A lot of times they would make fun of the male and female gender, both together. Sometimes even going half and half in their costuming, where they have lipstick on one side and a mustache on the other. They're kind of like pioneer for that. We also have the Queen of Vaudeville, which is Ray Bourbon. They were a gender blending performer, mainly leaning towards femininity, and they were the first to really bring in those sequence gowns we talked about before. Because before we would have a lot of patterns, a lot of lace, a lot of like satin. They started bringing in the sparkles, all those pretty things that we see today on all of our garments. You also have the Bull Dagger of Harlem, that is Gladys Bentley. Now Gladys Bentley was a vaudeville performer who became known as the Bull Dagger of Harlem because of kind of how they took charge. how they walk into the room, how they, also with their music. So she challenged social norms with her performances and helped pave the way for the LGBTQ plus performers that we see today. Was an American blues singer, pianist, entertainer during the Harlem Renaissance. Her career skyrocketed when she appeared at Harley Hansberry's Clam's House, a well-known gay speakeasy in New York in the 1920s, as a Black lesbian cross-dressing performer. She headlined the early 1930s at Harlem Ubagi Club, where she was backed by a chorus line of drag queens. Like, imagine this, dressed to the nines, much like myself, three-piece suit, top hat, killing it on the piano with nothing but beautiful drag queens behind her as she's just giving you the blues, giving you jazz. I love it. I mean, honestly, icons. She dressed in men's clothing. She loved tailcoats, top hats. She played the piano. She sang, and she wrote her own very raunchy lyrics. I can't say any of those today, unfortunately, but look them up, look them up. But these are still popular tunes, even to this day. There's a lot of people that have covered them and you wouldn't even know it. She had a very deep growling voice and loved to flirt with women in the audience. Just all around a player. So big, big drag icon, and honestly, one of the first drag kings. We also have William Dorsey Swan. If you don't know anything about Swan, I need you to dig so deep into all of this paperwork right here, hit all of those movies because they inspired a lot of them. Back in 1888, there's an article I found. It was actually a police report from New York. So they had these things called cakewalks, which was basically what inspired our modern day Kiki Ballroom and even Soul Train, where people would dance and at the end you get a cake. I can't say what they used to call the cake, but it's basically a corn cake. It was a sweet corn cake. And you would get these at the end, and that was like your trophy. You won your category. But in 1888, they actually raided one of the theaters that they were performing in during these cakewalks, and basically accused them of keeping a disorderly house, which keeping disorderly house is basically just rough semantics of 1800s law saying that they were basically keeping a prostitution house, which is not what was happening at all. But they did that to a lot of these performances. So vaudeville going into your pansy craze, they would shut down a lot of these places and accuse them of prostitution or of any type of sex crime to basically get the theater shut down or to get the speakeasy shut down. I think that's mostly what I've got. I think that other than that, a lot of the pansy craze and even Gladys coming here to Omaha and performing in some of our clubs, because Omaha did have a vaudeville scene on 24th and Lake. If you have a chance, look up Offbeat Club. They were inspired by a revitalization of that. And they actually had some of our first early little clubs all the way up until the 70s.
That's gorgeous. So I'm heading us into our next era of drag. So to set the scene, we're in a really funny, funky political era. It's the start of the 1900s, and we're having a lot of overlap here, but when I say that these eras were so tight and they had so much rollover on influence, it's literally a difference of anywhere from 5 to 10 years. The 1800s is a very broad time where drag was a very light and nuanced situation that was going on with no real definition. In your key terms, you're gonna see two different definitions of drag. The top definition is gonna be male, female impersonators who are dragging their petticoats across the floor. That was the definition of drag at the time. There was no real association with queerness until later into the 1800s. But now that we're entering our Prohibition era of drag, drag is beginning to become associated with homosexuality and queerness. So the foundation has been laid. Drag is largely still considered cross-dressing men in theater spaces, but something big has begun here. All around the country, all around the world, cabarets and productions are being put on. Now in Louisiana, a cabaret known as the Creole Show, formerly the Creole Burlesque, has hit the scene. This is significant for the time because it is an all-Black cast who is subverting stereotypes and creating art with cross-dressing. And at the very forefront of this is a woman in male drag. This woman was Florence Hines, who played a dandy and sang live. Now, in our modern drag, we have a lot of specifications of drag stylings. You're gonna see comedy queens, you're gonna see dancing queens, singing queens. Usually there's not a lot of overlap. People like to really grab their thing and like hang on to it. But at this time, everyone was a jack of all trades. You really could not get away with not having it all. So Florence Hines was singing, writing their own shows, producing, dancing, comedy, everything. Now, the Prohibition era, this is a short-lived era of drag popularity, and it quite literally was roughly from 1930 to 1933. So from the start of the Volstead Act to the end of the Volstead Act, we had this popularity. What I like to compare Prohibition drag to is COVID and the arts. We had a very short time here where we really grew to appreciate our artists because we needed them. We were isolated from our communities, just like these people felt like they were isolated because they couldn't go to the bars and see their friends and go and get a beer or a drink. We grew to love our artists and appreciate them for the entertainment they give us, and it was the same with drag. So New York's Greenwich Village and Harlem were the epicenter, like most nightlife. Omaha at the time, as Ziggy said, was also a lively speakeasy culture. Prohibition, like many socio-political movements, enforced what was driven by a belief that alcohol was damaging American society by disrupting families. This sounds very familiar. There's going to be an ongoing theme as each of the panelists speak, and it's going to be that there are laws and legislative action being made that is in direct alignment with polite society's moral values. This is significant because at any turn it's going to disrupt queer life. Now, it doesn't matter if the ban or the law was innately directed at us, but it is for us at the end of the day. The idea of a healthy nuclear family, which is what was driving the Volstead Act, is going to oppose queer family dynamics. The 3-article rule of the 50s and through the 80s is what we're also seeing today, something very similar with the bans on children under 19 at drag shows. Now, if you have any interest in a timeline of politics and legislature that's going to affect queer life, I did write down William Eskridge's Gay Law, Challenging Apartheid from the Closet. This is one of the most significant documents that I've ever read that directly is going to correlate law to how it's affecting queer life. It's a lengthy read, but it's definitely worth it. Gay culture and vaudevillian drag blossomed during the Roaring 20s. It is noted as the first explosion of drag as a mainstream art form. People were searching for fun, and they were willing to rebel against the ban on the production of and the sale of alcohol. Patrons of speakeasies, gay and straight alike, came in droves to see the boom of a familiar art style akin to vaudeville. Because we're transitioning out of vaudeville, they want something as flamboyant, but now we're seeing ties to queerness, which makes it even more dangerous. They're like, ooh, we're breaking the law, but do it even more now. Female and male impersonators made it into the mainstream at this time. With The Dangerous Widow, we're seeing films, plays, and music, even the stages of Broadway, being touched by male and female impersonators that were not the traditional vaudevillian sense. Ziggy brought up Julian Etledge. I also want to bring up Laverne Cummings. He made his name in the early mid-20s as one of the most prominent female impersonators of the era. She was a split singer, which means that she had the most crazy range you could imagine.
Yeah, 22 octaves, I think.
22 octaves, yeah, could not imagine. They were featured in a movie called The Golden Gate Murders, which was very, very popular, and it's a classic. Notably, there were more than 20,000 speakeasies in New York City alone. The drag ball scene was created and became prolific in Harlem at the start of the 20s, not as we know it today, but there was pageantry. And I want to express with significance that pageantry is one of the biggest parts of drag culture even to today. We love a good page. is what brings us together, and it's what gives us a sense of accomplishment. Back when our community had no accomplishments, when we felt like we couldn't get jobs, and when we were isolated from the outside world.
Really give one. And also, Jean Malene actually was one of the first ones to call themselves of many to call themselves a queen and identify that title for drag performers and as a queer performer. It was one of the first people to call themselves queen of the gays. But yeah, the same era.
Like I'm saying, there's a lot of overlap here. Shows at this time were referred to as pansy acts, and this was on purpose because this was what producers found to be a loophole to avoid being persecuted. Now, persecution did happen, but we were like, let's slap a Band-Aid on the chaos that we've just created. We have a gay man, a lesbian in drag, and instead of calling it what it is, we're gonna call it a pansy act. It's something fun, it's flamboyant, but things were still happening. Many venues would promote and happily display these productions, and this continued into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where we would see what began as pansy-style shows, vaudeville, into pansy-style shows, that became full-scale productions produced and performed by today's definition of drag, of what we see drag queens. So for my last few little seconds here, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up my favorite drag troupe, which came quite a bit at the end of the 50s and 60s, but the Cockettes. I love the Cockettes. I have a film about them documented on the sheet, as well as a book called Who Does This Think She Is? It's the life of Doris Fish, who is known as one of the founders of punk drag, alternative drag. Now, we try to keep things very lighthearted, but there is, into the 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of anger, a lot of hurt in our community, because things grow violent with things like the 3-article rule and extortion by the police. There was a lot of rage, and Doris did it beautifully by creating these wonderful punk shows that if you were to go to, you had to go with the understanding that most likely something would be thrown at you. You would most likely possibly get slapped at some point in the night. This was cathartic for our performers. It's what became punk, it's what became alt, and I am a punk and alt drag performer, so I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up. But as we're transitioning out of Prohibition, which didn't last very long because people like their booze, we know because we work in the clubs, but we are going to see the Harlem Renaissance start to bloom. And the Harlem Renaissance is going to kind of catapult a nationwide and international blossom of drag culture as a result of persecution because of the AIDS epidemic, as a result of social isolation of white, cis, gay men isolating our Black and trans POC community members. So I'm gonna give the floor to our wonderful Purris Stilton.
Ooh, racism. What a fun topic. Now, as Donna was saying, during that time period, it was very dark. So I'm just gonna read what I wrote. Be gentle with me, it's my first time doing something like this. So pretty much we were pretty fresh-ish off of the pansy craze in the 1940s, and we saw the shift of masculinity and the gender roles as a man shift more into a conservative mindset. Very blue collar, very I have my dinner on the table by 5. Very, did you watch the kids today? Nothing like that's going on here anymore. But at that time, okay, remember at that time, drag was very still much underground, and definitely seen as something that depraved people do, but it was still used in Hollywood for comedic relief, such as a cis man dressing in women's clothing as disguise, or for comedic relief, like I said. Let's push forward. I want to feel like Mliss, I want to feel like Donna. Let's push forward. So like I said, very much drag and queer expression was still very much illegal, and queer people were being thrown into jails. Queer-friendly establishments started enforcing these anti-cross-dressing laws, and they made cis men legally obligated to wear no less than 3-article gender appropriate clothing. It's called the what again?
It was the 3-article rule.
The 3-article rule. How could you forget that? Okay, 3 articles of clothing, 3-article rule. And essentially, if you were a man and you weren't wearing what would be considered to be gender appropriate, such as slacks, or if you're wearing a dress or a brooch, whatever, they could throw you in jail. And sometimes they would do more than jail. They would really just abuse your rights. Excuse me. I personally feel like during this time, from what I understand, because I clearly was not around in the 50s, but from what I understand and what I see, and watching a documentary that I will reference in a few seconds, drag was definitely an escape for a lot of people, but from what I understand, people were definitely understanding their identity through drag. It wasn't until the 1950s where the sexual revolution was definitely challenging the norm in a film called Some Like It Hot with Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, 2 straight white men doing their thing in drag. I didn't write that was off the cuff. But this film essentially created conversation about homosexuality and cross-dressing, all while breaking the Hays Code. If you don't know what the Hays Code, I don't think we have it on here.
I don't think we do.
But essentially the Hays Code was a set of industry guidelines for censorship as far as like what you could show on TV or in films. So a lot of, during this time, they were used to seeing men dress up as women and being funny. It was starting to seem as like, ew, gross, like that's not funny. Men don't do that. But when this film was released, it was right before the Hays Code was actually about to be like dismissed. And it created, like I said, a conversation about homosexuality and cross-dressing, even though that film specifically was not about homosexuality. Okay, it's the simple fact that these 2 men were dressing as women during a time where it was illegal to do that in film. And it went to go collect awards and things like that. So that's kind of like a kickstart as to kind of like the shakeup. Unfortunately, it was made by 2 straight white men. Okay, so my favorite film that depicts a lot of just queer living, or just, I hate the word lifestyle, but that's the only word I can think of, during like the mid to late 60s, is called The Queen. The Queen is essentially a documentary that took place in 1967 that follows Jack, but their drag queen name is the Flawless Sabrina. I will let you watch the film so you can see how flawless she is, okay? But she was flawless for the time, So essentially, Sabrina creates this drag pageant. As Mliss said, we love a pageant, we love a ball, we love a reason to get dressed up and be seen and heard by one another, but also it's kind of like our way of being able to blend into society and be a part of the norm, but on our own terms. So it follows Jack doing this, follows Sabrina doing this pageant, and it gives us a glimpse not only into the queen's lives, but if you really watch with your queer eye, if you are a queer person, you will see not only does it depict the lives of cis white men and some cis brown folk, but it also shows the lives of closeted trans women. When I first saw this documentary, of course, me being a queer folk myself, I was like, oh, there's a really key moments in here, it's really funny. But it wasn't until I watched it the 2nd or 3rd time when I started hearing these humans talk about their identities and their existence and the draft at the time, and not being eligible for draft because you're a femme man or a gay man, and hearing them talk about sex reassignment surgery and things like that. Cis men don't talk about those things. You know what I mean? You get me. They don't talk about those things. And it really just gave me a different point of view on the Queen. I know that's just really random, but if you do end up watching it, it really gives you a complete different perspective on the film. It gives you, when you're first watching it, it makes you think that you're watching a film about drag queens, but it runs much, much, much deeper than that. There's also another film that was made, but unfortunately the film was destroyed and they could only collect 20 minutes of it. It's called Queen at Heart, I believe. Let me just double check. I'm having a Ziggy moment. I lost my place. Choo choo train.
Now, if you look at your little
if you look at your little paper, this is what we like to call reading for children. We have a definition. So you just saw with a little bit of a read against a friend. It's polite. It's all in good fun.
But choo-choo. Queen at heart, and it also shows, again, to the non-queer eye, it shows these men interviewing drag queens, but when you hear these humans speak, or these women speak, balls and pageantry was a way for trans women to really live their lives and to really be seen and heard. And I feel like that is a point that is really missed when you talk about documentaries and just the trans existence. A lot of people just think that like trans people just pop out of nowhere, girl. And they've been there. It's just how they were being covered, or how, I guess, they were being documented. So make sure you watch very closely. It is such a great movie. But I'm gonna keep going because I only got a couple minutes and I've been over here reading Ziggy, so I apologize.
This is where we go into the developed form called shade.
It's dark in here, ain't it? It's dark. Okay, so I want to point a few parts out in the film that are just really iconic for the time. In the film, you see these cis men go into a bridal shop in broad daylight. Like I said, it's illegal to do this. It's illegal to be in any non-gender conforming piece of clothing at this time during the 60s. And these men were going into bridal shops, and trans women were going to these bridal shops and were trying on dresses in daylight, open it up, all of that. For 2 seconds, you actually forget that what they're doing is illegal and very much punk all at the same time. They don't give a shit. Am I allowed to say that? They don't give a care. They don't give a care. They're out there living their lives, and it's just such a beautiful moment to catch on the TV. But it also depicts, this film also depicts the start of ballroom culture, or beau balls, as some of you guys may know them. The mother of House of LaBeija, Crystal LaBeija, who walked out in the middle of the pageant due to her marks and her temperament, gave us one of the most iconic scenes of the movie, pointing out not that the winner was not deserving. She was lovely, she just wasn't lovely tonight. And most importantly, that none of the true beauties competed tonight. This POC trans woman would not only go on to create the most legendary house, but went on to create space for Black and brown queers such as myself to be seen and heard. One more thing I'd like to point out in this film is the complexity of the people in the film and the conversations that they were having. Pepper LaBeija, as you guys maybe know them from Purris is Burning, which is one of my favorite. You see a very baby Pepper, okay? You see a pep, okay? She mentions of being turned down from being able to enlist in the Army. Now also, if you guys don't know who Pepper LaBeija is, Pepper LaBeija went on to carry the House of LaBeija after Crystal passed. And very iconic. Watch Purris is Burning. But she states that she wanted to enlist at the Army, or she was drafted at that time and they turned her away because she was too femme looking. And she was very distraught, she was upset because all she wanted to do is be able to fight for her country. Now, I want you guys to sit back and think, like I just said, this is a POC. I won't necessarily say trans because I don't want to say their identity, but they were definitely gender fluid and femme forward. And a queer person. At that time in 1967, not only were you being extorted by the police, not only were your rights being violated just as a queer person, but your rights were also being violated as a Black person. And so to still be experiencing all of that hate and all of that anger and that nastiness and still want to fight really just baffles me. That is the only time you really see Pepper in that film is because she drops out. Because none of the true beauties competed, okay? You catching up? Are you listening? Another film that I wanted to just talk about really quick is called P.S. Burn This Letter, Please. It was a film that was released in the past couple of years, such a great film, but it also shows just correspondence that took place in 1958. And it just shows that drag was still a very taboo, bless you, a very taboo topic in New York and New Jersey. It also brings up the invention, or I guess the continuance of lavender linguistics. If you look on your paper, it's right on the top. And they really, I guess I won't say the invention, but they bring up the words mopping. Is that in here?
It's not.
Mop means to steal. So you mop that dress off the floor. I want to hear that at the water cooler tomorrow, girl. I mopped that whatever off of Derek's desk, had no business having it. That's my paper. Reading, which I just obviously showed you what reading was, and gagged, which hopefully
As I am.
very gagged. Gagged. I don't know if it's in. Yes, it is.
No,
Gagged.
it is.
It's in there. I believe
I put it in for you.
on. Thank you. I believe it's on the second page. Gag is to be shocked. Ooh, sensation. I'm so sorry. There's so much. I'm so excited to talk about it. So, like I said, that film just depicts conversation between queer folk, the literal underground balls that were taking place, that were inspired by the balls that happened during Prohibition. Or was it vaudeville? And just really showing the carefreeness of a queer person, but also how secretive it was, mainly just out of survival. Also during that time, the Imperial Court was also introduced, which is a network. It's a network of organizations for LGBTQIA2S+. We actually have a chapter here in Nebraska. If you're looking at a lady for life, you're welcome. Bow down, no, I'm kidding. Essentially, that nonprofit organization not only like helps network other queens and really creates a space for queer artistry, but also it raises money to send fellow queer kids to college. We love to be able to lip sync in the club for $1, but also we love educated queens as well. And I feel like the Imperial Court really just shows the dichotomy of our community. And towards the end of the 60s, the Hayes Bill had come to an end. So I'm not sure if you noticed, but I'm sorry, that was the wrong word. If you look at film, if you notice like I would say in the 40s, there was like a lot of like cross-dressing as hee hee ha ha. In the 50s, it starts to dwindle down. In the 60s, you don't see it at all, except for really a few films, Some Like It Hot, and I know it's out of the country, but there's also a film that was released in 1969, I believe, in Tokyo, that talks about a trans person and them being a performer. It's very artistic. Give it a watch. I couldn't keep up, but give it a watch. And then you kind of come to the 1968, where the revolution began with a brick or a bottle being thrown, depends who you ask, maybe nothing at all. But I don't like to use the word riot because of what is connected to it, but it wasn't riot. The Stonewall riot happened. I feel like it kind of just created this, not created, let me keep it real. If you look, and this will be the last thing I say, and then Jaden will take care, he will tell you all what happened at the riots. If you watch The Queen and you hear the conversations, if you watch P.S. Burn This Letter Please, and you listen to the correspondence that's happening between the two people, you will hear or feel that there is something bubbling under the surface, that people are getting tired of being abused, they're getting tired of not being seen, they're getting tired of not having a space to call their own. Take it away, Jaden. Make sure you know.
Before we transition to Jaden, I'm so sorry, but I want to quick just circle back to house and house culture. For those of you who may not be familiar or enjoy Drag Race and heard a little bit about the House of Colby, very recently here, house culture has been brought up, and you heard me talk about it at the start because I'm a member of the House of Mischief. We have the House of Charcuterie over here.
House of Charcuterie.
House of Charcuterie. A house essentially was a way for a maternal or paternal figure who may have been in a bit of a higher socioeconomic standing. It wasn't a lot. Maybe they owned an apartment. To pick up queer youth up off the streets and bring them into a safe system that had rules, regulations, where they could uplift them and help them get educated, help them get to school. On your sheet, it's just gonna have a brief description. It was just a family style unit because many kids were being excommunicated from their families, left out on the streets. They were forced to hustle. Hustling at the time was survival sex work. And if you do end up watching Paris is Burning, which I believe is essential viewing, you have the very unfortunate scene of of the documentee speaking with a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old boy who are working on the piers. It's horrific, it's very saddening, but that is the history of our community, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up and explain it a little bit more in depth, because it is significant. And as a white member of my community, I also have to acknowledge that at the time, this was not, we weren't really affected. White gay men, white lesbians, they had their bars, they had their clubs. A ballroom was created for POC entertainers, for POC trans women, so that they could have a safe space, because they had support networks, white people did, POC did not. So when you watch Paris is Burning, you will see a stark contrast where the entire ballroom scene is all Black gay men, Black trans women, Pepper LaBeija, our extravaganzas. We're all women of color, we're all men of color, and they had to create that for themselves. They did not have the support of the community. So when you see things like the new queer consciousness, these new terminologies, we have to acknowledge the privilege that came before us. And I'd also really quick like to point out, when I wrote the key players sheet, I was on hydrocodone, so I didn't get everyone that I needed to get, I'm so sorry. But I included life, birth and death for several members of our Harlem queer ballroom scene, because it's significant. As I was putting down names, just about 7 of them that I was writing down, most did not live past 50. And our beautiful, beautiful Venus Extravaganza, who was a key player in Paris is Burning, she died at 23 and she was murdered not long after that film aired. So this is significant, and I'm going to hand it over to Jaden to talk about the kind of end of the start of the Harlem Renaissance, moving into what we call the golden era of drag, which is kind of our early 2000s to present.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to highlight for this panel is the work that Black and brown queer and trans activists put into the movement as we know it today. So during the middle of the 20th century, queer and trans people of color were being overwhelmingly targeted by police due to discriminatory quote-unquote impersonation laws. Police were known to raid queer bars at alarming rates. Eventually, some of these bars offered bribes to local cops to keep them off their backs. Not all were given that grace, but that was a thing that was happening back during that time. More often than not, after these raids, queer and trans people of color were barred from these same bars. So that goes back to what Donna was saying as white gay men, white lesbians, they had their bars and clubs, and they would say they're quote unquote welcoming to everybody, but when it really came down to it, they would discriminate Black and brown, queer and trans people. Definitely stark contrast there. By the mid-1960s, this time was a very fiery time in US politics. We saw the calls to end violence and injustice that were being inflicted upon Black and brown communities, more so queer and trans people of color. The civil rights movement, in combination with fervent efforts to overthrow Jim Crow, were most commonly associated with the decade reform. But it's also important to acknowledge that the fight for bodily autonomy, women's rights, the abolishment of police brutality, and ending the Vietnam War were at the crux of the movement for queer liberation. In 1966, one of the first trans-led rebellions happened at the Compton Cafeteria in San Francisco, California. This was referred to as the Compton Cafeteria Riot, which served as a prelude to the Stonewall Riot. So everyone kind of thinks that the Stonewall Riots was the first big riot that kicked off everything. Yes and no. There was a couple of instances prior to that that served as a prelude to Stonewall. 3 years later, on June 28, 1969, the Stonewall riots took place after NYPD cops did not receive their local bribe from the bar owners, and they proceeded to force their way into the bar and attack everyone they saw: trans people, drag queens, gay men, lesbians. And unlike in previous riots, like in the Compton riot and the Cooper Donuts riot in '59, queer folks rebelled like never before. After decades of just plain violence and injustice and systemic oppression, this was the event that changed things as we know it today. So at the forefront of this rebellion were many prominent trans people of color and drag queens. Some of them were Marsha P. Johnson, who is on the key player sheet, Sylvia Rivera, Miss Major, Storm DeLarvery, who was a prominent drag king, and they led 6 days of intense protest in the Stonewall neighborhood. As a response from Stonewall, there were some more privileged white gays who didn't like that took place. But nonetheless, folks like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera weren't having any of it. Because at the end of the day, the folks being the most targeted were queer and trans people of color. So the next year after Stonewall, 1970, the first kind of Pride March happened. It was referred to as the Christopher Street Liberation Day in NYC in the Greenwich Village. That was, like I said, the first Pride March in the US. Continued queer activism after that resulted in the formation of groups like the Gay Activist Alliance, the Street Trans Action Revolutionaries, and the Gay Liberation Front. Prominent queer and trans people of color revolutionaries at that time include Barry Rustin, who was a prominent advisor to Martin Luther King Jr., Audre Lorde, Ernestine Eckstein, Barbara Jordan, who later became an elected state senator in Texas, Angela Davis, and James Baldwin. So, go to my notes.
Train, it just keeps going in circles.
Yeah, going in circles left. So one of the groups that Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera formed was called STAR, the Street Trans Action Revolutionaries. The purpose of this group was to provide mutual aid, to feed, to clothe homeless and disavowed queer youth who were either thrown out of their homes or homeless or anything like that, just to build community and provide that mutual aid. I think this is a prominent example of the power that our community has when it comes to organizing around the issues that matter to us. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera both fervently believe that the struggle against racist oppression and for the trans struggle, women's struggle, and gay struggle to be combined as one. Both of them were also involved in the Black Panthers movement at the time, and the Young Lords, which was like a Hispanic group, basically a Hispanic version of the Black Panthers. And they fervently believed that we needed to build a rainbow coalition to get anywhere. And that's at the crux of many civil rights movements during that time. Well, like I said, there's many factions in the community that didn't agree what they were trying to do, but they didn't care anyways. But despite the trials and tribulations since, there's been many defeats, but there's also been many successes as well. I think as drag has started to become more mainstream, I don't want to say it's more accepted, but it's it's more out there, right? It's more out there than it used to be. And it's because of the work that people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera have done in the community to grow the visibility of drag queens and trans people. So another example of, prominent example that I thought was significant was, where is it? There goes the train again. Okay, so further forms of protest include, there was a group called the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And this was a charity protest organization that used drag and religious imagery to educate, organize, and fundraise for LGBTQIA2S+ related issues. They have been very successful in their efforts since forming in 1979 to raise money to fight back against AIDS and to fight back against pharmaceutical companies who were not providing HIV drugs. And so again, another example of drag being used to push back against the establishment. And so that's kind of the main area where I covered, but the final thing I kind of want to say is, despite these trials and tribulations since the decade of reform, since the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, there's many issues that remain unresolved. Drag continues to shock the establishment, empower the marginalized, and challenge the norm. It's transgressive and provocative, symbolic and subversive, and the struggle for queer liberation, drag queens, and kings should never ever be estimated, ever.
Thank you, Jaden. So that obviously, as we're exiting the 1990s, queer liberation is at the forefront of what we love. We see in 2009 the start of RuPaul's Drag Race, which many people know, and then we see shows, spin-offs that are expanding from there. We're Here on HBO, Equal on HBO. You're also going to see alternative shows like Dragula, Camp Wanakiki, which is closer to home for all my who live Colorado. But what we're going to do, transitioning out of this long-term panel, is a Q&A. I'm going to just open it with, a cute question, but if you have other questions as well, we'd love to hear them. Our question is, what was the most significant thing you may have learned today, or what do you wish that we maybe could have touched a bit more on? And we're going to do this like a tight 15, 20-ish, and then we're going to do a call to action. Don't be shy.
I don't know if this is so much as a question, but growing up, my experience with drag was seeing cis males dressing up as women in comedy and this mocking women and misogynistic. And so I've always had this kind of suspicion that drag is misogynistic. It's just personal. And thank you for this, because it expresses that this is a personal feeling for these people. It's not, they're not out there being misogynistic, like we're better women than you are or something like that. And so I'm glad you did this program.
Thank you for coming. I think that was actually at the forefront of my mind when casting for this panel. And it's what I think about when I produce shows a lot, because honestly, I'm in a unique position as someone who may be white, but isn't stereotypically what people perceive to be the norm for a drag queen when you think of a stereotype. I am assigned female at birth. I may be non-binary, gender non-conforming, but I'm a little bit different. So when I was casting this panel, I wanted to subvert stereotypes and create an accurate representation of what the Omaha drag scene does look like. Because we have quite a few people who are assigned female at birth. We have quite a few people who are gender non-conforming, who do not just male-female impersonation. And so I wanted to create kind of like a realistic expectation. But thank you for coming. And I think, especially also when creating these key players, key terms, I almost put fishy on there for terms. I don't know if it'd be brought up or not when it comes to like passing for ballroom. But the root of a lot of drag does have misogyny in it, I feel, just as like we're seeing racism in our earlier ballroom scene, earlier queer liberation, not that it's ended, by any means. Our community is still a little bit divided, we're working on it.
I think it also leans into, I think a lot of the misogyny also comes through with how drag was able to actually be shown to the masses. It could only be shown if we were the butt of the joke, if women and gays were the brunt of the joke. That is the only way it would be able to make it onto television or into theater for a long time. So I think what you're seeing is what they wanted you to see, but not what we are, which is, I appreciate your,
Do either of you two have anything you want to say about that, or?
Testing. I too would like to say thank you. Just being a queer artist for almost 12 years, I completely understand the view of it looking or being misogynistic, because there are moments, and I'm sure us being AFAB people doing drag, we have come across that, and it has been very strange. But at the same time, being able to be an AFAB person and almost poke fun at like hyper femininity is really fun to me. That's it. But I really do appreciate your outlook, because it really does. I've had people say that before, and I guess I never really thought of it that way. I guess for me, I've always just tried to always look at the art that I was presenting, but like there have been weird moments, so I can totally understand that. No? Okay.
Other questions, comments? Yes. Carol, I can always count on you.
I went second this time. My name's Carol, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a cisgender woman in her 50s.
Okay,
For just a little longer. And my first exposure to drag was in college. And we had an organization, I went to the University of Northern Iowa, and we had an organization called Uniqlo, UNI Gay and Lesbian Organization. And they had a fundraiser that just exploded on campus as far as every party wanted a drag show to perform, and you scrounged up all kinds of money to get the drag show, otherwise your party just did not rank. And so, I came through that experience and then moved to Houston, where, there's an area of Houston called Montrose, which is like massive amounts of drag and variety of just amazing performers and all that exposure. And I really thought at that point in time, hey, this is all cool, everything's great, and this slapdown over the last decade has just been kind of crushing. And I guess I'm making more of a statement than really a question, but I just want to thank you all for sharing. There's a lot of this terminology I never knew. I mean, I walked around Montrose a lot because there is no better people watching than Montrose in Houston. And they threw just incredible festivals and parties. And, and I was in my 20s at the time, and you just kind of in 30s, and you just kind of wanted to go to that. And I've seen some of the shows here, which have been fabulous. We had a performance over at Iowa Western, and a big fundraiser there that was just incredible. Just incredible. And I was like, those are women. I'm like, is there cellulite on their ass? All right, then no, those are.
I gotta check my ass now. That's somebody.
Anyway, I just want to say thank you for sharing. Part of, in my development as a human being is how do I better support? How do I be a better ally? What can we do to amplify you and to share all this goodness?
One, share our shows, show up for our shows, love on us, protect us when we're out and about, and those people get weird, and vote.
Yes.
Just for God's sake, vote, show up politically.
I second that. Please vote. Please vote. Please pay attention. Because it, especially with the laws that they're trying to pass, it just doesn't affect queer artistry and the medium that we choose. It affects gender nonconforming folk, it affects trans folk. It's much bigger than us. It's so much bigger, and I really wish that people would really just open their queer eye and really protect us, love on us, protect one another, because we truly need to take care of ourselves. Queer people need to take care of ourselves, because I always think of my queerness the same way that I think of my blackness. I can't hide from being black, can't run away from being black, as I can't run away from being queer. And I want to be able to stand in my queerness the way that I stand in my blackness. And when I'm around my community, I want to know that I am loved, I am seen, and I am heard, and I am safe. So please, when you see a performer, or if you see another person from your community, and if they like hugs, you can hug me. I'm not really a hugger, but I'll take it. Come touch, I'll take that. But just, hey, I see you. I know it may sound creepy to say, but like, hey, I see you, and I'm gonna protect you, and vice versa. If I see any of my community on the street, black, queer, I'm going to protect you. Queen, I'm going to protect you, and I just want the same. So come to our shows, vote, tip us, stay to the end, because I be seeing y'all leave during intermission, and it pisses me off.
Yeah, and protecting us, it doesn't just mean like, I'm not saying everybody needs to be that kind of pacifist where you could occasionally pass a fist. I want you to also just think about like, okay, we all have that one uncle. Tell him to shut up.
Right?
Tell him to mind his own business. Like, you know what I mean? Like, those people, sometimes it's speaking is enough of a protection. Because silence is compliance, guys.
Silence is permission.
Absolutely.
Last question here, and then we can get into the panel.
Perfect, ask away, and then we'll do it. Our call to action kind of got revealed, but yeah.
Hello, my name is Tim. I go by he, him. I guess learned a lot today, and I see the definition of drag have changed to like a century, and where do you see drag being or drag representing in the next 5 years?
A series of just Morse code.
Yeah, you thought the Lavender linguistics was crazy, now.
Girl, he bop boop bop and then ow.
Sorry, scatting, everywhere we go. Drag within the next 5 years, even within the last, so I've been doing drag my whole life, as just a gender nonconforming person. But this past year, I have had the immense pleasure of starting to do drag full time. And as an AFAB entertainer, within Omaha, we've seen a very stark change. Like at the Max, we had the Mr. Max pageant, and up until this year, AFAB performers were not allowed to compete in this pageant at the Max here in Omaha. You could not compete unless you were a cis man in drag or a male entertainer.
Honestly, up until a couple years ago.
Yeah, so this year we've had our first AFAB king, Alex Dren Kennedy, sweep the title, as we love to see. And there was some backlash within our local community here. Many, older gay men who have, want to maintain their privilege were like, absolutely not. Backlash, but we are seeing a shift of love and support. So within the next 5 years, I want to see drag everywhere. I want to see every kind of person doing drag, and for me specifically, my life's mission with drag is I want drag to be accessible. As a disabled person, I want to see accessibility at all drag shows. I want to see, I love y'all so much at Doll's House, but I need to see a ramp backstage. We have performers with cerebral palsy. We have performers with wheelchairs. Those ropes and things on the ground, not safe, not accessible. I want to see interpreters at every single show. That's my mission. I bring interpreters to my shows because the deaf queer community here in Omaha rocks, y'all. Okay, we have ISD across the river, and we have so many deaf people here that have relocated who have trans kids who are deaf, queer kids who are deaf. Support our deaf community, queer and not, because they support us. They come to all of my shows. They love us and we love them.
Honestly, I think in the next 5 years, I feel like it's going to be hitting even stronger on a political platform. I feel like drag is gonna go from, I mean, it's always been punk, it's always been a little political, a little bit like fighting the man, like it's all been about this. But now that it's become an identity, a career choice, I feel like it's going to mold itself as an actual medium in theater. Not this underground theater thing, not this, we have our own little special theaters for us, and then there's the real theaters. I'm really hoping that in the next 5 years, I can say that I have a cabaret production at the Orpheum.
Give it up for the Orpheum, I'm kidding. I don't want no smoke with the Orpheum, I'm kidding. As a queer performer that's been a part of the Omaha scene for almost 12 years, I remember there being a point where I was literally the only AFAB performer. I was the only one. I am the only one. I'm kidding. I was literally the only one, and I feel like Donna has really hit it on the nail on the head as far as just how far queer artistry has just come as far as just Omaha goes. 10 years ago, like I said, I was the only one. Now I'm seeing not only more AFAB performers, but I'm seeing just queer artistry in general that doesn't technically or really even need a term. I personally feel like drag, and I know I said, if you've read your pages, I know I said that drag is art, expression, freedom, and it's really changed over the years, but it's come down to those three things. Edit. Drag is my big FU to society. But I personally feel like drag is this. Drag is getting up out of bed. Being a performer, to me, the dichotomy to me is being able to make that change. To some people, it may not be a huge change because I am a AFAB or a super femme woman, but to me, drag is being able to just present yourself however you want it to be. You don't need to necessarily be on a stage or be a man, but drag is when you wake up in the morning, like, it's literally what RuPaul said, you're born naked and the rest is drag. If I didn't have such shame, I'd take my wig off right now and I'd be like, this is drag! This is drag! But y'all recording this.
You're gonna make trouble on bitches.
Y'all recording this, and I don't want this on the internet for life. But that, I personally see drag becoming more accessible, like Mliss said. I see drag, I know it's already evolved, but I truly see drag becoming something for everyone. I feel like even now with us having such a push forward as far as what artistry is or what queer artistry is, it's just going to get bigger and better to the point that I personally feel like we won't even call it drag anymore. And I think that will be such growth. Yeah. Ooh, it's an online question.
So I know we said the last question was last, and there was an online question in the chat that I wanted to pose others. So, hello folks, I have 3 questions. 1A, I'm curious to know the individual advice you would give someone who is fresh in drag, or maybe thinking about performing. Part B, where do you
Click down in your chat box and then
Thank you. Where do you see drag culture in Omaha being fully embraced? What are your thoughts about the representation and support for the Black and brown performers here in Omaha?
And I'm the perfect person to have.
Purris.
So, as a Black, like I said, I hate to keep nailing it, but as a Black queer performer in Omaha, being on the scene for 12 years, the Black and brown scene as far as just queer artistry, it's booming. It's amazing. There's so many great artists out here, but we're not getting booked. One of the reasons that I started producing shows, like I said, I've been doing drag or AFAB drag for over a decade, but I've been doing burlesque for about 4 years now. And I promised myself when I became a burlesque artist that I was not going to produce shows because it takes a lot of energy. But when I saw that Ziggy and I were literally the only Black people that would be in the shows, I started to feel tokenized. I started to feel like my art wasn't being seen for the true amazingness that it is. My judgment, not yours.
Yeah, we were just.
But it's become a thing to the point where I'm not seeing nobody that looks like me. That I started to create shows and produce shows that solely had people that look like me and people who are brown or indigenous, where they have a safe space to not only be properly paid, that's another conversation, but to be able to show their art and not be tokenized, which is super beautiful. We need more of that. To quote my mom, I can't do it all. I can't do it all. Ziggy can't do it all. Another amazing Black queer performer, CC Pebbles, they cannot do it all. And we need more white allies. We need more people who are willing to not take pity on us, but truly see our art and give us a space where we can be adequately paid and be seen. That's what we want. We don't buy all these rhinestones and all this bullshit just to be performing for closet space. Okay, we've been out the closet. We don't want that no more. We want the same thing that our white counterparts have. So that needs to be addressed. I can't do it all, y'all.
And as far as starting in drag, I would say start out with just going to shows, getting to know the community. A lot of us come from some form of ballroom or cabaret backgrounds where we are very open to having stage hands, or what we like to say stage kittens. And you can always come and learn the ropes by assisting us during a show, helping with props, helping pick up cash, helping backstage, and like really getting to know the ropes. And then you'll eventually find somebody, my womb is closed, but you'll eventually find somebody that will be your parent on the drag scene, and they will help you out, and they will guide you. You can always ask one of the seniors. We are like, siblings. We will always give you advice, but we are no longer parenting. We are done.
This muffin shop.
These factories have closed. Yes, we're done with drag kids, but yeah, just show up to the scene, be a part of us, and you'll learn, you'll join.
A lot of what was just said, nails the point on the head. I'm in a unique position as a performer here in Omaha, that I'm a member of two houses, one significantly and one kind of honorary, that is headed by CC Pebbles, a Black AFAB performer, and then a Black trans woman. And my position within my houses is a pillar of support and to uplift these women, these performers, and to utilize my privilege to create space. But the first, I want to kind of point out, the first time that I really spoke to Purris, I messaged you, because I found out we were both in a show together, and I was familiar with this performer who was producing the show. Purris was not really. And this performer was not, really phenomenal at uplifting their cast members, but as well as like pay was not great. And so as an ally, as just a decent human being who respects Purris's position in this community, I messaged her and I said, hey, I know you don't know me, but I respect you and your craft enough to tell you that this show's not worth your time. And a lot of performers are not willing to do that, I've found, within our community. They're not willing to admit that producers do not treat their cast well, and then they're willing, but that is leads into you're not the ally you think you are if you're not willing to tell Black, brown performers that they're going to be giving away free labor doing a production like that. It was not worth it to me, and I knew it wouldn't be worth it to Purris. So I gave them the courtesy of letting them know that it was not worth their time, it was not worth their effort, because especially within our community where we have performers who are being tokenized, the expectations of their craft far supersedes any of the white queens in our community. And we have so many talented white queens, and I love them so much. I am one of them. But white mediocrity is so freaking real, okay? When you're cast constantly, because you're in this hierarchy, you become stagnant. You do not feel the need to improve, you do not feel the need to excel. So when I see people like Purris and I see people like Ziggy, academics,
that's my baby. That's
academics, y'all. Emerald May, who's coming up in the scene, my drag mother, CC Pebbles, who bring a production to every single show they do. They're changing hair, they're changing costumes. They have a 17-minute mix if you're Dior Carter.
That's my girl.
And they're giving you everything. They're putting their heart on the floor. So when I knew that there was a chance that Purris was gonna walk away with $2, I had to let them know. That's allyship in our community. And that's what I want to see shifting, and it is shifting, I feel, as we're growing and as we're creating spaces. In regards to the second question, really quick, since I'm probably the freshest here on the scene, I got my start in drag by going to shows. A lot of shows do like an intermission thing, like especially OMC. This was at Throwback, they were doing it, but they have like the 18+ nights at some bars. If you're at Sydney, yes, queer night, 18+. Show up, support. I went every single week, because it's every Thursday night. I went every single Thursday night, my last semester of college, and I would dress up every single night. I was like, ooh, look at me. And I would dress up in the theme, depending on the theme. I was so obnoxious. And finally one night, Alana and Bianca, my sister, love my life, she was like, hey, we had someone drop. You're so cute. Do you want to like do a number? And Cece performed that night, and that's how I met my drag mother. So stuff like that, showing up, being willing to invest in the community before you're a part of it. I hate to be like, pay your dues. But pay your dues. Pay your dues, for real. We want you to perform, but we have so many entertainers who don't get booked already. So we want to make space, but have it be like a meaningful space. Jaden, Joe, anything you want to say? And we now can continue with our call to action.
Yep.
All right, so it got revealed earlier. Call to action: support local drag. I have a few shows that many of our panelists are going to be performing in, and I'm just going to list them. If y'all have your phones out, you want to do a little Facebook event search. If you guys want to follow any of us on social media, we can go down the line and get that to you here in a second. So starting strong with Blackberries Burlesque.
Yes.
Produced and hosted by wonderful.
I'm one of the co-founders of Blackberry Burlesque, which is a black and brown burlesque troupe for peeps in their 30s. We will expect, some of the late 20 people too, but you gotta be eventually mature. But we will be having a show June 25th at the Strut. It is our it is our opening show. It'll be the first time we'll be truly debuting as a black and brown troupe. So please come out and support. It's a lot of fun. It's for the grown folk. Can I carry on the shows? Is that okay?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. You can also, because I got them, girl. You can also catch me at Flicks or supporting other black and brown or just queer artists at AK-47's show at Netflix called Girls, Gays, and Theys. It's super cute. Definitely please attend, see some of the amazing artistry that we have here. Support all queer artists, but especially black and brown, but support us all. And then First Friday Pride. I'm a part of BFF Omaha, which is a nonprofit arts organization, and as Ziggy said, they were the inclusionary chair. I am the new inclusionary chair, whoop whoop, and I'm also the membership coordinator, and we have a great big ball every first Friday of Pride. So we have some live street performances. We'll also be having a show called Judy Jam, which is our version of Wigstock, another queer history back in the day, or lavender linguistics, or linguini, as I would like to say. She's a friend of Judy. That was a way to be like, they're gay. Okay, I don't have nothing else to say about it, but it's like, she's a friend of Judy. So that's why it's named Judy Jam. Again, another free event. Please attend. Please see us in our peak artistry, outside, makeup running, sweaty, all of that. See us in our peak. And then also, Queer Night is having a show that same night with Pure Ecstasy and another queer amazing artist, E-Rock, which is an amazing black artist. He is amazing and should definitely go out and support. Just don't support queens, support all queer artistry. And that's all I gotta say. Y'all won't catch me on the mic no more.
Yeah, so we have a couple more shows here. when it comes to Pride, I strategically planned this. It wasn't, I got the wait list, but I will not be in my peak drag form. You will never see me sweat outdoors. I'll be sitting this one out, all right? Support Dior's Playhouse. I mentioned Dior Carter, that is my sister. I'm an honorary member of the House of Carter, we love. Dior's Playhouse will be June 17th. This upcoming month at the Sydney in Benson.
She has another show this Friday.
Yes, this Friday at Dior's.
It's
Saturday at the Max. We also have another Dior's Playhouse. It's the birthday show, Gemini season. Any Geminis in the room?
No,
All right. I might come and help co-MC. It depends on if but
This one.
it's gonna be MC for sure. So
And I'll
if
be
you wanna see some performances, that's the one to come to. And then we have Mistress Burlesque, Sunday, June 18th. We have a lot of early shows this month. Anna's Place, it's, a cute little 8 p.m. show. We love an early show. It's a speakeasy, yes, we love speakeasy. And then also, June 18th, I will be at Mana Games in Lincoln for their Drags to Riches Pride show. Now, I will not be twirling, will not be doing a split. I will probably be standing in place in a wig, doing a little number, but it will be very, very fun. Some of Lincoln's best will be there.
And then if any of y'all are ready for some adult fun or old enough for adult fun, we will be doing an adult-only Pride little gender blend at the night before.
Yep, the night.
In Lincoln. We'll both be there. So you'll get to see me do a couple pole tricks, so come on out.
I will not be doing pole tricks. I will be eating a corn dog and minding my business.
Now I think we can wrap it up with maybe doing some social medias in case anyone wants to look at our Facebook events, wants to get involved more in what we do in the community. Does that sound good? Everybody have their phones out? So, my social media is super, super easy. My Facebook is quite literally just my name, as it's written, so MLISS, and then _ Rose for Facebook. And then everywhere else, you can find me at Donna _ Resuscitate. Now Resuscitate is hard to spell. I also can't spell it myself. There are 2 S's in there. It's a little bit tricky, but you'll find it.
You can find me as Ziggy Quinn. My page is on Facebook, or as it's written, SARAYAVOGEL, Saraya Vogel on Facebook. You can also find me as Ziggy.Quinn on Instagram.
Again, my name is Purris Stilton, like Paris Hilton, but if Charles Barkley had said Purris, Purris, Stilton like the cheese. You can also add me on Facebook, me being a true queer artist. I do not have a Facebook with my government on it, okay? Because that's how you get not hired for jobs. That's how they get you. And then also, if you're always looking for a way to support community or just arts in general, specifically queer arts, please add BFF Omaha on your socials as well. They always have really great free events, but also it's for the kids, it's for the community, it's for the artists. And they have definitely helped support some of the artists I see in this room, including myself. So,
Y'all can find me on Facebook, Jaden Perkins, Jaden, Perkins, like the restaurant. It's my favorite one. You can find me on Instagram at practical_radical. You can find me on Twitter. I believe it's under that same handle. And yeah, that's my social medias.
Awesome. Well, we are at time.